The Story of Bakelite, from the original John K. Mumford book, a J.E.M. Films production. Adapted and edited for narration by John E. Maher. Voiced by John McDonough. Looking back to the morning of the world, Bakelite lingered till the day of crying need. It was hidden in the coal of mountains and in the wood of trees, which from the earliest age have been the symbols of regeneration and immortality. It came only after the long and patient labor of many hands and many minds. It is not sufficient to say that Bakelite is formed from equal parts of formaldehyde and phenol in the presence of a base by the application of heat. It is more than that. It is a wonder stuff, the elements of which were prepared in the morning of the world, then laid away till civilization wanted it badly enough to hunt out its parts, to find a way to put them together, and set them to work. It was heat that did it, fire which man worshipped till he found it was more useful in the kitchen stove and the coke oven and under the chemical retort than on the sacred altars. Heat, and yet more heat, wrought the miracle. Born of wood, Bakelite looks like amber or like hard rubber, and as solid as a rock. Child of wood and coal, it resembles neither. Heat makes it, but heat can never again melt it. Its father and mother are caustic and corrosive, but Bakelite has not even a vestige of taste. Acids will not cut it. Alcohol or solvents will not dissolve it. Water, which was its grandparent, will not penetrate it. Its uses are without number, and it is yet the youngest child in the chemical family of prodigies. It is at once a contradiction, a mystery, a tireless factotum, a triumph of creative chemistry. Go back as far as you like. Hammer your way with the geologist along the path down which life has traveled on the earth, and put your finger on the remotest period he can name. That will be the time when Bakelite began. When man the Heriter came at last, he found the stage set for his long drama of existence, a finished world. A farm all fertilized, stocked and planted, a home with the cupboards full. In his slant and undeveloped skull was the key to unlock them all. He had simply to learn to use it. It is work, the primal curse that all science aspires to lift from low drudgery to planes of greater accomplishment, that has increased the height of his forehead and trained his body to incredible activity and skill. That has given him power to construct and to destroy, to defy the sea and harness the lightning, to wrest from the rock and the forest, the water and the air, a million objects for his need and his comfort. Without this age-long curse of work, man might be today a mollusk, living eyeless in his shell, washed to and fro by the tides of a knowledgeless world. Work has made him the master of creation. Up to a short time ago, man was still a child among his playthings. His ship was a log, his house a cave, his raiment the warm coats of beasts. He had learned that in this world, to save his own skin, he had to fight, to kill, to conquer. For weapons, he had a club and a rock. Through the centuries, rowelled by curiosity and ambition, man accomplished something with the materials at hand and squandered them merrily. He was beginning to develop an eye for business. Civilization had begun. Man stumbled and fought his way along, but kept adding to his store of knowledge. Beauty was born in him. Women graduated from fig-leaf aprons to Pekin gowns and diamond girdles. Man exchanged his wattle hut for Beaux-Arts palaces on Long Island and castles in Spain. Man ransacked the globe for things of use and luxury and gain. New gold, new coal and oil, new and fertile lands, wherever there was any easy getting. Thither he went by land or by sea, and there again he wasted. Then at last he began to see the bottom of the treasure house. Mankind had at last played out its first string. The things he had been discarding he must now use. The grubstake was at an end. The store was gone. The day of the chemist had arrived. The chemist had shaken off the suspicion of sorcery. He was shriven at last of the charge of necromancy and witchcraft. For 200 years and more he had been living on short commons, analyzing everything he could get his hands on, animal, vegetable, or mineral, pulling creation apart to see what was in it, much as a small boy dissects the parlor clock. He was an analytical chemist, finding out what things were made of and tagging them for future reference. He had separated molecules from molecules to see what they would do. He was a builder. The architect might design skyscrapers. The chemist would create new substances and create them out of anything. He had made an inventory and turned the world's waste heaps into colossal assets. Once more mankind was rich and getting richer. He knew what could be done with the wastes that lay at his own doorstep. The ash heap in the backyard, the smoke that was whirled away from 1,000,000 chimneys, the slops that the garbage gatherers toted away to be destroyed in the city reduction plant. These and numberless other kinds of rubbish were at once the chemist's distress and his inspiration. That pall of smoke that soiled everybody's linen and made marble buildings look like cinder contained wealth untold. But it was in wood smoke and coal smoke, pouring up chimneys the world over, that he found the new treasures of earth. Marvels which earth had never known, colors to shame the sunset, medicines for every ill, explosives to blow whole cities to pieces, perfumes surpassing Araby, sweets that have made Hymettus merely a figure of speech. Electricity, as old as earth, had terrified primitive man. And now a super resin, Bakelite. Answer of the chemist to the call for a new reign on electricity, that tricky but titanic force that pulls the apple cart of the human race. Modern man knew no more than the savage what it was, but he had learned to guide it and, to a certain extent, control it. But new and more powerful currents called for new and better insulation. In every direction lay problems with no material solution. The world wanted a resin that would not melt, one that would accomplish 1,000 things that old ones wouldn't do. Bakelite had been playing face tag and blind man's bluff with chemists for 50 years. One after another they tried to harness it with some kind of chemical contraption or other. They knew it could be serviceable if they would ever find out what it could do and get it down to work. What this tricky thing might do if anyone could capture it was hard to tell, but the possibilities were tempting. So the chase began. Many wise men set out upon it, but quit and went looking for something easier, having barked their shins and bumped their heads in the labyrinth through which it had led them. The list of men who had pursued this will-o'-the-wisp is a who's who in chemistry. Those who had struggled with the phenol-formaldehyde equation really didn't know where they were going. So many different things can happen using the same ingredients under seemingly identical conditions. This was the riddle of it all. The thing was too fascinating to escape attention. Dr. Leo H. Baekeland, being a broad-gauge chemist, was looking over the entire chemical field for a first-class job that somebody else couldn't do. He tackled the tantalizing puzzle of the phenol resins, before which a small army of good men had thrown in the sponge. He took off his coat and went to work with a will. A period of toil, disappointments, surprises, chemical-blind alleys, and scientific hard knocks, which he declared was the happiest time of my life. In all previous manifestations of this phenol-formaldehyde combination, there had been revealed an almost human perversity, a mischievousness that bordered on diabolism. It always did the unexpected and did it provokingly well. Professor Charles F. Chandler said, "When formaldehyde is let to react to phenol under circumstances, almost anything may happen, except the formation of Bakelite." But Leo Bakeland kept feeling his way along. The one thing he didn't do is quit. It is doubtful if there exists another synthetic product made from coal tar which compares in the universality of its uses with the thing that Bakeland created in his little Yonkers workshop after the best minds in Europe had given up. Instead of sitting down discouraged, he started on the long labor of further systematic chemical research and pure laboratory work, lasting for many months, covering every imaginable phase of the whole business. It was the beginning of trial and tribulation. He stocked every solvent he could think of and began a round of toilsome and thrilling days. Bowled over at night, his balloon of hope deflated. He was up in the morning with a new hypothesis, and at last got down to Z. When it was ended, the elusive thing he had been pursuing was backed into a corner where it could never get away. He had a vision of Bakelite, a thing with all the virtuous traits of insolubility, infusibility, resistance to solvents, acids, and oils, a substance usable as a gum, but of far wider application as an indestructible solid. The trick was to have mastery of it from start to finish, to make it do at will everything that might be in its repertory. How wide that repertory was, he didn't know. In his long period of systematic research, Leo Baekeland discovered where all his predecessors had blundered. At last, the miracle was underway. He reasoned that if heat was the creative agent, it was in heat that the secret must lie. Counter-pressure was the answer. If a thing was inclined to foam, he would put the lid on it. He did it, experimentally, by compressing the air in his oven, and instead of fearing heat, he crowded it on, even up to 300 or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It worked. The liquid had changed into a beautiful, transparent piece, like amber, that had taken exactly the shape of the glass receptacle in which it had been born. On cooling, it fell out with a perfect glossy surface, but it differed from amber in that it was much harder, much stronger, and that all the heat in the oven could not melt it. The new amber was quite another thing. The hotter it got, the harder it became. All the heat in the oven couldn't melt it now, even though it might char. As he must use pressure to keep it down, he would make a virtue of a necessity. He would crowd the molten material into the small crevices of a mold under high pressure and heat, and thus be able to form the most intricate articles, which, with other and less facile materials, had required a world of costly machining and hand labor. The world, at last, was very much his oyster, but he still had to open it. He had the wild and elusive thing that had lurked in the phenol formaldehyde broth tamed to do what he told it. In its last state, it would transform the whole business of molding. There was no stage of the process where some mission could not be found for it. He had something much better than the sought-for shellac substitute. He had an amber-like resin which not only withstood solvents and would not melt, but possessed a strength hitherto unknown, even among the best amber or the hardest copal, and a lot besides. He could use the liquid syrupy stuff for a varnish, a lacquer, an impregnator of woods, and harden it by additional heat to the point that it might laugh at the attacks of everything from rainwater to 100,000 volts of electricity. Having broken his horse, the inventor proceeded to ride it and learn its paces. It was exceedingly strong, so strong that from a 1-inch rod might be suspended an automobile with 7 passengers, but it tended to be brittle. He set out to remedy this by mixing with the pure substance the clear, flour-like powdered spruce which he brought from the forests of Norway. It gave the toughness and the molding qualities desired. An enduring wooden monument to vision and brains and perseverance that doesn't know how to give up. Under the disciplinary process of Bakeland, phenol, with all its skittish propensities, settled down to business. It was important now to discover just what its capabilities were. After he had formed the stuff, Dr. Baekeland counted up 43 industries where he thought it could be used. The task today would be to find 43 industries where it couldn't. The possibilities of Bakelite loomed very large. Invention was finished. It was now a matter of commercial adaptation. Scarcely had the Bakelite patents been published when hectic work was started in every country that had a chemist. In the making of Bakelite, there is no melodrama, nothing even mildly spectacular. To get a thrill out of this quiet process, the beholder must possess the eye of imagination, and he will still go away wondering if it isn't all a fairy tale. When it is heated again, it will be like the word that is spoken. It has to stay so, for after that heating it can neither be melted nor dissolved nor burned, except in an infernal heat, and even then it will char, and that is all. When an article emerges from the mold, it comes out shining like a new piano, with a smile that won't come off for anything much short of a file. And this is what he had. For some physical reason that nobody has yet made wholly clear, when the product is in the mold, under pressure, a thin coating of pure Bakelite flows to the surface of the mass at every point, crowding the filler behind it. When it sets, this forms the glaze. But it is more than glaze. It is a protective coating, with all the resistance to weather, to acids, to oils, to almost everything that Bakelite possesses. The surface finish has an everlasting luster and the smoothness of glass. Before the advent of Bakelite, it had been necessary to machine a great many of the more difficult things. One part could be made of one thing, but its neighbor demanded another. Bakelite had it all, and molded to greater accuracy. The medieval armorers of Damascus and Toledo could not have turned out any finer bits of craftsmanship than some of the polished molds that American toolmakers carve from steel for the molding of Bakelite. Half the things that Bakelite can be made to do and more have grown out of the inventor's thoroughness in perfecting control of the initial resin, at every step of the way to final hardening. All fabrics, especially if warm, absorb the liquid resin as a kitten laps up milk. It is workable, even to the finest details. It can be sawed, punched, sheared, shaved, bored, reamed, planed, drilled, or threaded, and it can be shaped in the course of its manufacture. Laminated Bakelite is capable of as many variations as steel, and in the end may come to have almost as wide a range of uses. Automobiles have it spattered all through their works. Adaptable as no other material in the world, it outlasts brass and cast iron, and by doing this heavy work in soothing silence, it is ministering to the noise-racked nerves of people who labor among machinery. For every electrical purpose under the sun, the money-saving power of Bakelite begins to reveal itself. Born with an endurance that ought to make metal ashamed of itself, its limitations remain to be discovered. It invades the chemical laboratory where it was born as a protector of metallic equipment against injury by acids or other chemicals. You can, with a particular composition of Bakelite, make a billiard ball that, if dropped 2 stories, will bound back 1. You can mix Bakelite with graphite and make a self-lubricating bearing, or going to the other extreme, you can mix it with abrasives and create as good a grindstone as has ever been made. That is the story of the making of Bakelite, the universal molding material. To follow Bakelite in its many forms into all the places where it has found service would be a lifetime journey. Wherever wheels whir, wherever women preen themselves in the glitter of electric lights, wherever a ship plows the sea or an airplane floats in the blue, wherever people are living in the modern world, there Bakelite will be found, rendering its enduring service. Leo Baekeland had tricked Bakelite forth into the service of mankind. It is at once a contradiction, a mystery, a tireless factotum, a triumph of creative chemistry. Bakelite, truly the material of 1,000 uses.